Derik Queen is more than just Zion Williamson insurance. His versatility can be a secret weapon for the Pelicans this season, but also beyond. It's a Tuesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Tuesday, and we are going to talk about Derik Queen. Kind of controversial draft pick for the Pelicans. We're going to separate that from it. We don't need to talk about the trade right now. What can he do for the team? What's his role this coming year? And why did they go so hard after him? Again, we're not going to look at the trade and debate that. I see him as Zion Williamson insurance. We're explaining why that's important. But also, he can be so much more. But there is a very important swing skill that he's going to need to nail at the NBA level. We're going to cover it all in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Don't forget, you can also watch the Locked On Pelicans podcast on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every weekday at 10:30 a.m. So let's get into this one right now. Derik Queen, we are not going to focus on the trade here. There's no need to do it. What's done is done. That's kind of been literally beating a dead horse here. It's been covered. Let's talk about what he can do on the court because he's on the team and it's as simple as that. And this comes from a conversation that I had on ESPN radio out in Los Angeles, actually, last week. I was talking with Andy Kamenetsky, who hosts Locked On Lakers on there too, and we were kind of looking at the outlook for the team. And he asked me about the Derik Queen trade and what I thought his role was going to be this coming season. This coming year, I view Derik Queen as Zion Williamson insurance. There is a similarity between both players. One, they are both very good at facilitating. We've heard of Point Zion. We've seen Point Zion in action. Both of these players, Derik Queen did this tremendously well in college, facilitating out of the mid to high post, back to the basket, or even in a face-up situation, or on elbow kind of profiles right around the free throw line in those areas. That's an area that, he can facilitate, draw a man to the ball, draw two to the ball, and play make out of there. It's the quintessential point forward type of role. Derik Queen has done that, exceptionally well. When you look at his assist percentage in college, in his lone year at Maryland, as a freshman, keep that in mind, he ranked in the 75th percentile. Not just the 75th percentile for big men, but the 75th percentile overall. He was doing this with guards, with wings, with other bigs. Look, that's a pretty good stat, all things considered, if you think about it, right? Actually, which is kind of crazy for all of this, right? Of eligible players to be drafted, which is basically everybody. Derik Queen ranked 67th in terms of assist percentage. By the way, Jeremiah Fears, the other Pelicans rookie here, ranked 11th. He was actually ahead of Dylan Harper in assist percentage. But for a big man, that's real good, y'all. That is a very, very good number, in my opinion. So he can play make out of the high post. Simple as that. That is Zion Williamson insurance here. Now, one of the before I get to the and now part, look, that's because he has a very good interior scoring game. In terms of shot attempts at the rim and scoring at the rim, he ranks really, really highly in those categories because he's such a skilled interior big man that can score like that. Teams need to cover him. They need to throw to it. It opens up the game, right? Very similar-ish, right, as a crafty interior scorer to Zion Williamson here. Now, Zion and Derik Queen have different skill sets in that scoring, right? Zion tends to do it on driving and attacking. Zion tends to do it layups and other things. Derik Queen has some of that, not quite the same player as Zion Williamson, but they kind of fulfill a similar role. That's the Zion insurance. A lot is being made of, well, Zion and Derik Queen probably don't fit on the court together. And yeah, at first glance, truthfully, it's a little bit questionable. Don't disagree with that whatsoever. But that doesn't matter, right? I don't know if you need to play them together a ton. You just need Derik Queen to fill those minutes when Zion Williamson isn't out there on the court. We saw this 2 years ago, the 49-win season when Zion played 70 games. At the beginning of the year, they tried to use him off ball. They tried to make their offense not Zion-centric, and Zion seemed out of sorts. And as the year went on, they realized, it's not the best way to do this. We need to put the ball in Zion's hands. The reason they tried to make it a non-Zion-centric offense was, well, Zion Williamson misses time. And if he's missing time and you design your whole offense around him, you don't have another player, because there barely exists, another type of player that can kind of fulfill the same role that Zion Williamson does. Zion Williamson, and we'll talk about this in the third segment, is such a unique big man that, if he goes down, everything kind of falls apart, and you've seen that over multiple years here in New Orleans. And it's, again, this paradox, as I've been referring, to Zion Williamson as. He's such a unique big that you've got to kind of play to his strengths, but then if he goes down because of the injuries that he has, well, then you're kind of, in trouble there. Everything falls apart. Maybe it's not paradox. Maybe it's like a contradiction kind of thing, right? You get the difficulty of this. And it's not like you can just go and acquire a player that's like a Zion Williamson that's that unique of a player. You'd be looking at like a Domantas Sabonis or type of, another type of player, an Alperen Şengün type of player. You don't just go and get those guys. But you can trade up and draft one in Derik Queen that fulfills a similar role. Similar role with a different skill set. That's important. You now have the Zion Williamson insurance that you have not been able to get. And so if Zion Williamson gets hurt, you can conceivably pop Derik Queen in there. And while it won't be exactly the same, you're getting some of that. And that's better than none of that, which is what the Pelicans have had in the past. This is part of the reason, I think, for the Pelicans, to wanting to trade up and giving up a lot to go and get Derik Queen. That's an important thing to kind of keep in mind when it comes to all of this. When I was on ESPN radio in LA, one of the things that was said here was that, that is if Derik Queen is Zion Williamson insurance, the Pelicans paid one of the most expensive insurance premiums that you could possibly pay. And my response to that was, yeah, that makes sense. You kind of need to do that. Right? Look, Zion Williamson is risky. When you have a risky situation, your insurance premium goes up. It's as simple as that. If you've been in a bunch of car accidents, right, your insurance goes up. Simple as that. That's how it works here. So if you view Derik Queen as that Zion Williamson insurance, you're going to need to pay a lot to have it because it's a risky proposition. So, in one sense, I don't mind the trade from that kind of perspective. Again, I would not have done the trade. We're not really going to debate the trade, but you start to kind of understand why the Pelicans did what they did, particularly if there was a I don't want to say mandate, right? If Joe Dumars stepped in and was like, we're going to try and make the playoffs, I don't want to go through a rebuild, whether he was told to do that or whether he didn't, or he just doesn't want to do that or not. Okay, then you're going to need to pay certain premiums that are going to be more expensive than others because of that. Simple as that. If you're not going to trade away Zion, if you trade away Zion Williamson, you don't need to go and get a Derik Queen. You can do this differently. More on that in the third segment. But if you're going to keep Zion, you need to have an insurance plan, a backup plan. It is now Derik Queen. Derik Queen, by the way, looking pretty good in the workouts, has his hand wrapped in like a brace, but kind of going through a lot of things and makes me feel like he could be ready to start the regular season. That would be really good and really important for New Orleans. Some positive injury luck for this team for once in a while. What do you think about Derik Queen as Zion Williamson insurance and the premium that you may have paid for that? Let me know in the comments down below. Coming up next, though, I want to look at how Derik Queen can be far, far more than just Zion Williamson insurance, right? Let's talk about, what this guy can really do on a court and how he could either be a new era for New Orleans or be more versatile than Zion Williamson is. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy delivers tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and zero crashes. What I love about them is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot that you can take anywhere and get the boost when you need it. My bachelor party is this weekend. Think we're going to have a lot of 5-Hour Energies with us here just to kind of keep us going. But when I'm on the golf course heading to it, just grab one. It's right there. I don't have time to make coffee. The convenience can't be topped. So enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com or over at Amazon. Again, 5-Hour Energy. That's just big taste, great caffeine, tiny shot, super convenient. Give it a try. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Whether you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below, or someone who just tunes in occasionally, I appreciate y'all being here. If you're international, that's awesome too. When I did the fan survey, the amount of people who said they were like international all over the world listening to the show is really cool to see. Pelicans fans everywhere. Your passion is why we do this. So tell friends about the show. Really helps with everything. For your second listen, by the way, it's the NBA's Top 100. We've done this at Locked On for the first time, our top 100 players for the upcoming season. Find the full list on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I've kind of covered a lot of that the past 2 weeks. Where does Zion rank? Why is Herb Jones so low? All of that. Make sure you give those shows a listen if you haven't. But your second listen should be Locked On Sports Today for the NBA Top 100. So let's look at Derik Queen, and I just talked about him as Zion Williamson insurance, and I definitely think that he is, even if you had to pay an expensive premium for that. But he can be a whole lot more. I do think that Derik Queen is one of the more unique big men that we've seen come into the NBA in a really long time. He just does so many different things at, by the way, like a very incredibly high level for the most part, that I do like the type of player that, he really is. This is someone who is a very crafty interior scorer that has an exceptional feel for the game, that can be kind of an offensive hub, but has the ability to develop their swing skills in a sense, the ability to be a stretch forward, depending on how the shooting goes. So he can be the guy you run your offense through, or that almost 3-and-D big man that does a number of other things well that the Pelicans have needed next to Zion Williamson for a while. Admittedly, he's not there yet, right? He's more of an offensive hub right now than the stretch big. So unless that kind of really changes, there's a questionable fit next to Zion Williamson. But when you look at the kind of top-end NBA comp from him, I've started to kind of shift on how I view him a little bit here, right? I can see him being a Domantas Sabonis, Alperen Şengün type of player. Şengün having a ton of success in Eurobasket here. He was an all-star this past year. Basically, that guy that is your offensive hub, I'm saying that a lot, in the post, that facilitates a ton, that can attack on face-ups, can score in the post, but also potentially develop three-point range that you can just kind of build your offense around, right? Sabonis rebounds at a high level. We'll talk more about that with Derik Queen in the next segment here. Şengün does a really good job of that too. But kind of in the median, I think there is some Naz Reid in him, a guy that a lot of people wanted the Pelicans to try and go and get in free agency, even if that was never going to happen. One, because Naz Reid was going to re-sign, but also because they just didn't have the money to be able to go and get him. But you basically then have a versatile big man who is a matchup nightmare for opponents and gives you just advantages that way, an advantage creator. That's what you're kind of looking for here. And if his defense works at the NBA level, you're going to feel really, really good about him here. His offensive game with the level of craftiness, let's call it, refinement in his offensive game is not something that you usually see from big men here, along with the facilitation that he can do. He is easily one of the more skilled and creative post players in this draft, and that's part of the reason why the Pelicans really traded up for him with that versatility that he has, that has a level of finesse and physicality to it. He's a big dude. He is a big dude that should be able to overpower a lot of other big men here. You know, this is someone who shot near 70% at the rim, and off ball, by the way, was shooting close to 80% on cuts and things like that. Again, he can be your creator, but he can also work well off ball. This is where people who say like he and Zion don't fit are kind of just looking at some of the surface level stats and not looking at some of the other numbers here that make you go like, no, he can be used in a variety of different ways, I think. You know, I think when you look at his creation and his passing ability, and this is true of Sabonis, of Şengün, even Zion Williamson too, you know, he does have a pretty high level of basketball IQ on the offensive side. We'll get to the defense here in a minute. You can see how he really is seeing where the defense is moving and how to find the right kind of angle of passing. One of the things to look at when you're passing in the NBA, right? You know, one of the things you could easily say is like angles matter. The way you get the ball in from your left or right hand, those angles are different as they converge in one point. That can mean the difference between threading the needle or that pass being, you know, a turnover and turning into a steal, I think here. You know, he definitely needs his jumper to be a little bit more consistent if he can get that. You know, he has a very complete offensive game. You know, when we talk about a complete offensive game, that is not what we refer to with Zion Williamson. That's someone who is definitely much more power than finesse. Though he has finesse when he finishes at the rim, but not really in the rest of his game per se. I think he can kind of grow into that. You know, he's the downhill freight train that when he gets a full head of steam, good luck stopping him. And then the finesse comes with how he finishes at the rim. He finishes like a guard, like a Kyrie Irving level player. He's probably one of the best finishing big men, Zion Williamson is, that I've really ever seen. But there isn't a ton of a face-up game to him right now where there is with Derik Queen. This is why the versatility can really be opened up a whole lot more. Teams are kind of daring Zion Williamson to shoot that mid-range jumper. They're going to give him space right there to try and back off against the rim. Against someone like Derik Queen, I don't know if you can really do that because his face-up game in that mid to high post is a pretty good overall type of game right there and something that he has a lot of skill with. That makes him pretty elite, right? You know, the fact that he can then work off ball, off cuts and things like that too is once you get the ball out of his hands, if he hustles, relocates, that is a terror on a defense. There's going to be questions about his conditioning. Right? That's one of the things we've seen. He did not look like he was in game shape particularly well in Summer League. And his Summer League wasn't particularly great, even though it was, you know, ended a little bit early because of the injury that he suffered. But again, he's one of the more unique big men here, I think, in this draft that we've seen in a while. And it makes me pretty excited about what he can be. Insurance this year, but in the future, should you trade Zion Williamson away, things expand a little bit more, I think. I think you have a way to build a different offense overall around Derik Queen, whereas the offense that you kind of build around Zion Williamson with him as the hub has to be a certain way, right? It's a little bit more narrow, but Queen's is maybe a little bit wider. And that versatility at the NBA level is a massively important thing. That's how you then dictate the course of the game. Okay, your opponent counters you. What's the counter to the counter? That's where the tactics, the chess match, right? The anticipation of opponents' moves and things like that really comes into play. Derik Queen gives you the ability to do an absolute ton of that. But here's the thing. You've maybe not long heard me say this, but one of the things I've talked about with Zion Williamson is, you know, I'd rather build around a guard or a wing than a big man because big men tend to be unique and it makes it tougher to build around them. Anthony Davis was a little bit of the same way. When you kind of have a unicorn type of big man, it makes it tough to figure out exactly what to put around him and find those type of players. It just, in my opinion, makes team building a little bit harder than a more traditional kind of role. If you have a traditional big man, different story. But when you have these very unique, one-of-a-kind big men, that either have passing skills, three-point shooting, all those things, it can make it kind of difficult. There's a swing skill, really two, but mainly one in my opinion for Derik Queen, that if this is a thing that he's good at, this team is going to be in a really good position to actually build around him, and I won't be as worried about building around a big man as much. I'll tell you what that skill is and why you should feel optimistic about that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Look, FanDuel has been partnering with Locked On for a long time here, and I don't think I've seen an offer as good as $300. So if you've been waiting, this is the time to get in on the action. FanDuel is awesome because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, over on rushing touchdowns for Jake Retzlaff with Tulane, you got it, right? If you're building a same game parlay for a bigger payout, maybe it's the player props plus one of the spreads, you can do that too. Or if the action's unfolding or you're a little bit late to kick off here, you can have the live in-game betting. The lines are always adjusting. Maybe you realize that momentum is shifting one way. That's a way to take advantage. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more juice to your Saturdays and Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, $300 in bonus bets with FanDuel. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're not an everydayer, it's okay too. I appreciate y'all making Locked On Pelicans part of your day whenever that might be. Also tell a friend about the show. See, we're a week, not 2 weeks, a week away from Media Day. I will be there. I'm excited. We're going to be talking to the players, kind of getting a lot of insight on things here. How's everyone doing? Is everyone healthy? That's a big one. We're going to be covering it all right here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. For your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold. He's going to be traveling to Seattle for the game this weekend, seeing what the Saints can do to turn their season around. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I have said it's to me, and I just said it in the last segment, I don't love building around unique big men because I just think it makes it harder in terms of team building. Zion Williamson is a unique big man, and we've seen some of the difficulty in building around him, not the least of which, it's not the only reason, is they go down, there's no one to replicate some of their skill sets. But now the Pelicans have that at least a little bit in Derik Queen. One of the reasons it's been tough for the Pelicans to build around Zion Williamson is rebounding. Rebounding has been really poor for this team over the past couple of years, really falling off a cliff last season where they ranked as one of the worst defensive rebounding teams. Look, Zion Williamson is undersized for a 4. He probably should be more of a 3 than a 4. If you are not getting much rebounding from your power forward slot, your rebounding is, defensive rebounding is what we're talking about here, is really going to suffer with that. It makes it tougher. It puts more of an onus on your center and other players to participate in kind of team rebounding. And you don't always get that, right? Zion Williamson offensively, if you take him away from the basket, that can be a problem. If he's then pulled away, you get what I'm saying. It just makes it tough if you're not getting that production that you would typically get from that position from there. It can make things fall apart. It's why they've kind of struggled with defensive rebounding in the past. So that's the swing skill for Derik Queen here, right? He's a center at times, a power forward. I think he plays more of the 5, but he's a slightly undersized 5. At 6'9" and like a quarter essentially here. But here's the thing. If he can rebound, the Pelicans don't run into this trouble. If you were to take Zion Williamson out and put Derik Queen in, and Queen's a better rebounder, that fixes your problem, at least on that side of the ball. To me, if he can be a competent, above average defensive rebounder, this team is going to be in a really good position with him here. And the good news is he's a good rebounder. Derik Queen had a defensive rebounding rate in college of 20. 24.5%. Let's round up and call it 25%. Basically, he was grabbing a quarter of all available defensive rebounds when he was out there. That is an incredible number for a player, right? If you can get above 23%, that's a really good number, I think, for a power forward or a center. Jonas Valanciunas was often in the 30s there. Being 25% will work here, particularly because you can also play Queen with another big man. Derik Queen ranked in the 75th percentile of defensive rebounding last season, and it put him at 8th in the country. Janai Broome out of Auburn was 26%. Derik Queen was 24.5%. Broome was phenomenal as a defensive rebounder, just vacuuming up rebounds and the boards. Queen's numbers are like right there, truthfully, when you look at it with him. That's a very encouraging sign that you can build around this type of player. The other thing with his passing ability is when he secures a rebound, those outlet passes that he can fire. Kevin Love was really known for this. Can get you into fast break situations quicker than most people can realize. And that's a way that this team could really become very good. With Queen's handling ability, if he can secure defensive rebounds, he can immediately initiate a fast break. And if you listen to yesterday's show, when we talked about fast break and transition opportunities, that is where you can really easily score. You can secure that rebound and not have to give the ball to somebody else. A big man gets it, then passes it to a guard. That's allowing the defense to get back, your opponent, their defense to get back and get set, and it slows things down a little bit. If you can just secure the defensive board and go, when Zion does that, he's incredible at it. That's when this team can be even more lethal in transition. That's good defense leading to easy offense here, which is something that I have long said. You don't get a ton of that with Zion Williamson. You can potentially get that with Derik Queen because the rebounding numbers seem to be very, very good for them. Those are the type of things that really excite me and make me curious how he's going to work next year. We'll have more on Derik Queen in the future, more on Jeremiah Fears as well, but I wanted to be excited about him today. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. See y'all tomorrow.